All right, ladies and gentlemen, excited today to have, flying a little solo. Coach Schumann has some things to take care of. So I'm excited about this opportunity to sit down with Coach Mike Palazzo, head coach at Montclair State. Coach, really appreciate you taking the time and coming out and sitting down with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. Long time, right? Long time. We have a little bit of history. Obviously, like Coach Shubin always says, Montclair State kind of rules this podcast in terms of guys that come on and whatnot. So he's really kind of seen the network that we have and whatnot, which is awesome. So it's always an opportunity to kind of showcase, my alma mater and, the passion that I have for it. But, you get to see these other guys and they feel the exact same way. So, Coach, before we dive into any of that kind of stuff, just give me a little bit of your playing background, your coaching background. Give me your story to kind of how you got where you are now.
Awesome. Yeah. So kind of an interesting story, I guess, not the normal path. I'm from Toms River. I went to Toms River South. And, for people that don't know me, I'm not a very big guy. And I wasn't very athletic. So when I was a kid, I just played defensive line and offensive line. And, when you're in Pop Warner, you can be a small offensive lineman and get away with it. Then you get to high school and it's like, well, can't really play offensive line anymore. And my coaches put me at D line because, we moved and stunted and shot gaps and did some of those things. And, I worked really hard at trying to be good at that. I wasn't very good in space, but you told me how to take on a double team. I'll fall down and create a pile. So I ended up starting for 2 years at Towson University South, had a nice career, was captain of my team my senior year. And, I wanted to play college football. And, that time of year, which is just past for us, but, November, December, when coaches are coming in, nobody was calling me down. So, I think I was okay with it. Maybe I just didn't realize it, but I was like, you know what? Nobody really wants me. It is what it is. And I started looking for colleges based off of academics and picked a couple local schools. I applied to the normal ones, Kane, Rowan, William Patterson, TCNJ, Montclair, all those. And I got accepted to Montclair. I got accepted to Stockton. And those kind of were my last two, my choices. So I chose Montclair because I'm like, well, they have football and maybe I'll give this a shot. Maybe I can play there. And, I'll never forget it. I'm on campus. It's like, accepted student state type of deal. And I'm walking around campus. I'm like, well, I'm going to call the football coach because this is where I want to be. So I call and I get Coach O'Connor. And I didn't know who he was at the time. And I said, Coach, I'd like to play football. And Coach's like, okay, sure. Where are you from? What's your deal? So I start explaining. And they said, well, Coach, I'm a little undersized. And it's funny because I know Coach so well now. And I'm sure he was like this. He's probably writing his notes about me. And I said, yeah, I'm about 5'5", 150. I play nose guard. He probably went, all right. So, Mike.
It's funny you actually bring him up, bro, because we had Coach O on last week.
Oh,
Coach O was on last week, dude. So he kind of like, you know what I mean? So the reference kind of people, if they watch the show on the regular or go back and watch some of our stuff, like Coach O was on. So believe me.
It's so funny to think about back now because I'm sitting in that same chair where answering that same phone and, you get calls like that sometimes and you got to have to be a little realistic with kids. And I get it. I totally understand it. So, but 18-year-old me, that was like, oh man, I'm fired up. He thinks I can't play here. And of course, Coach O was respectful, just said, hey, we have a roster limit, all that stuff. So I was like, I want to play now. Now I'm motivated. And it was like that phone call motivated me to say, well, people think I can't do this, so I think I can. And I wrote a letter to a local reporter to try to get into the all-shore game. Because my thought process was, if I can play in the all-shore game, that's the best that the shore has to offer. Maybe that'll prove to the Montclair coaches that I can play at that level. And I was all conference in high school, but I just didn't get the invite to the game at that time. So it wasn't like I wasn't qualified to play, but I didn't get the invite. And he actually got me in. So I played in the all-shore game. At that time, it was Shore 44. It was a different name.
Yeah, it's a big deal down here, buddy. Believe me, it's one thing I've known. Like the all-shore game, don't mess around, dude. Like if you're all shore, it's like I can't, dude.
It's the oldest one.
It's a big deal. And look, I get it, right? Like, being from North Jersey, we had all-star games, and it was what it was. Back then you had the Governor's Bowl, you had North-South, and then pretty much every little county had kind of their own thing, right? You have the Robeson Classic, which is Passaic, Morris, a little bit of Essex, I guess, scrambled in there. You got the Snapple Bowl that used to be, right, like Bergen County All-Star Game. But listen, if there's one thing I've learned since being down here, buddy, that all-shore game is a big deal.
Yeah, and it's like it was a great week for me playing. Like, it was an awesome experience, and I'm really happy that it's gotten even bigger now. I remember seeing you last year at Monmouth. It was a great game last year.
Yep.
So it's a big deal, and getting in that was a big deal for me. I remember looking up to all the players that came before me and thinking, like, man, one day I want to be in the All-Star game. And I kind of felt weird writing a letter, but I felt like it was for the right reasons. And I go in, I have 3 sacks, and I get MVP of the game. So I'm riding high. I'm like, after this game, I'm like, there's no way Montclair's telling me no. Now I'm the MVP of the all-shore game. So I call Coach on Monday, and I speak with Coach G. And, Coach, how he was. He's just like, okay, I appreciate it. But, right now we're full. So, took the L, went to Montclair, didn't play football. I joined the track team, and I just was part of the team that way. And then when this is the part where you and I meet, I try out in spring practice that spring.
Yep.
And they put me at linebacker because, I'm not a big guy. I mean, you played with Darrell Sapp, who is as big as my house. And I'm thinking over here at probably 5'5", 165 in high school that I could play that position. So they put me at Will backer, and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I knew football. I had no idea. And I remember, you guys were it was a good defense back then. You got dudes. I mean, Cordell obviously was kind of in place as,
of course,
the main guy there. And you had Sapp, and you had Vinny Iachetta. And there was just so many.
Oh, yeah, we've had – and listen, and if there was one position that, like, obviously was above for those, seasons that, I was there, the 2006, 2007 really were, like, my last 2. Like, our defensive line was like 8 deep, Yeah. I mean, you across the board, right? And it's just, that was the position, right? We actually had, right, we switched defenses. We went from an odd front to a 4-3 in that time because we just had more dudes at the D-line position. So that was already going to be a tough move for anybody, and then that's where we kind of connect. And then, you know what I mean? Like, take us from there.
Yeah. So, try out that spring. It's the spring of 2007. So it's going into your senior year. Mm-hmm. And I just, look, I tell people all the time, like, I didn't have the talent to play college football. Like, I worked really hard at it. I wanted it really bad. And I think I made a positive impact on the team for what I did. But, it wasn't like I was going to go to some tryout and be like, oh, yeah, he's got something. Like, no, that's not the case. And on top of that, I never played linebacker before. So, I'm going to give a shout out to our boy, Danny Kransky, because Danny Kransky would, nobody knew, but Danny Kransky would tell me if it was a run or pass. We had a signal. So when I'd go in, at least I would, be able to react quicker. So, he was.
And you were also playing for, the DC at the time. Todd Agresta was the linebackers coach, right? So you're doubling down on a situation, right? And you know how Coach was. Coach was a different type of coach. Let's put it that way, right? He demanded a lot from his players, and it was not that it was in a negative way, shape, or form. That's just now how he rolled, right? Like, you were expected to do certain things, and our linebackers were really kind of the center of everything. And you're getting thrown in this position. And look, that was Kransky, right? Like, he was that guy, Sayreville guy, right? Always kind of out to help everybody. Like, that's just who he was, right? So easy to see how he does that.
Yeah. I'll still never forget that. Like, it just, he, didn't have to help me, but that's something that, like, I still want to play.
That's a Montclair thing, dude. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that just shows you the type of place it is.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned Todd, like, Agresta. He just was real tough. And it's funny because spring ball now, it's not like it was back then. We had 3 coaches coaching. It was Coach G, Coach O, and Todd, and that's it.
Yep.
Senior D-line coach was doing doing other things. He was
still teaching. He was still teaching. He was the head of the science department at Mount Olive, right? Or umping, right? Always umpiring. Yep. I mean, what people don't understand is that D3 football spring, right? And, we're kind of jumping a little bit here, but it still all gets back on track. Is D3 football spring ball in 2007 was not anything like what people think of spring ball. I mean, it was really, I think, maybe the second or third year we could have even used a ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was more workouts. You're kind of getting out there. Look, you're in shorts and a t-shirt. I don't even know if we threw jerseys on, right? Like, maybe eventually we didn't do anything against, offense was on one side of the 50, defense was on the other side of the 50. What we really were doing was we were pretty much repping defensively anyway. I mean, we were just repping packages that we were going to run, or trying to see who's going to be in what spots, who's going to play what positions. So spring ball was not 15 practices of pads rocking and rolling, and then we finished with a spring game. Like, it was very different.
Yeah. And if you remember, because Todd was by himself, he admitted to me later, he's like, I had to kill time. So remember, we would start with conditioning. We would stretch, condition. And then, big eye, offense over here, defense over here. We'd run down to the other side of the field and Tom, we're going to condition again. We're going to and we just run again. It was
just him. He was flying solo.
Yeah. Brutal. So, needless to say, after that spring season, I sit down with Coach G, and I was hopeful. I mean, never missed a day, never missed a work, that type of deal. But Coach G told me they weren't going to keep me. And, it was a short meeting. I got a little teary-eyed. I was upset. I thought that I had done enough to get a shot. And, that was back when Panzer had the weight room downstairs.
Yeah, buddy. Like a dungeon.
Yep. So, I left Coach G's office. I kept it brief because I got a little upset. And, I thought about it a lot, and I just didn't want to be away from it. I at that time, I didn't know if I wanted to coach or not. I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I just knew that if I wasn't going to be on the team, I wanted to be part of it because – I just spent a year of not being part of a football team. It was weird for me. I was sitting in the bleachers watching you guys play. I was at homecoming that year against TCNJ. And you guys, Jay Scott scored on a block punt and all that stuff. I'm sitting in the bleachers watching all that stuff. So it's like I go back like 2 days later and I sit down with Coach G. I said, Coach, listen, I understand that I'm not going to play this year, but maybe I can do something else. And that's when he offered me to be a student assistant. So your senior year now, 2007. Now I'm a student assistant, and I went to college young, so I was probably 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, dude, you were young.
Yeah, and I'm a student assistant. I'm Todd Agresta's assistant, and one of the smartest coaches I've met. I mean, brilliant coach. And then that cast of characters we had as far as the staff. I mean, dudes. I mean, guys that have gone on and coached a long time. Other guys that maybe haven't, but it was a good crew of guys that took me in, and they really took care of me. And Ron Gavazzi, and you had Scott Santora. Was Santora on this podcast?
Yep, Coach Sand's been on.
Yep. Then you had Siri, you had Walsh.
Siri's been on.
Siri's been on.
Dude, we had to cut that one short.
I'm sure. So yeah, 2007, my sophomore year of college, I was a student assistant. I was running around. I set up cones. I did whatever they asked me to do.
You did it all.
I did it all. Yeah. So people don't realize, like, it's so easy now. Like these new coaches don't get like film exchange.
No clue.
You hit a button and boom, you got your tape. I had to drive.
Amazing that you brought that up because Santora talked about, because you guys did it so well, the whole film exchange and the copying and this and all the video stuff, you guys did it so well that you started to control, you ran it for the entire conference, right? And I don't think these people have any idea. It's not like hit a button, done. Like, you had to sit and wait for all the tape to go. You had to go physically and exchange stuff and do stuff. Like, it was a whole different level.
Yeah. So my job as an 18-year-old college sophomore was at, whatever time Sunday morning when all the players were still sleeping, I had to wake up and I had to drive halfway between the opponent and us and meet their guy, the equivalent of me, and give him our VHS tapes. And then he gave me their VHS tapes while our staff was back in the office grading the film from the night before the game before.
Oh, so, yeah, those grades. Thank God for those grades.
Yep. So, that was my job, and you get a certain respect for it, and I think that's kind of what the staff at least respected me for, because all the other guys are out partying the night before, and like I really couldn't, because I had to wake up so early to do that, and I did that for the whole season, and I remember driving up to Lackawanna Station was the meeting point between us and Cortland.
Cool.
Yep. So I remember like all doing all that. So anyway, that season ends. And, I asked Coach G before the season's over, hey, I'd like to talk to you after the season. And he knew what I wanted. I wanted to play. And, I sat down with him after that. I did that whole year. Basically in the Coach G way, that the respectful person and great person just said, look, you're not good enough to play here, but you did all this stuff. I'm going to let you play, because that's what you want. And he said a line I'll never forget: you win with good people. And that's really true. It's really, really true. So yeah, then I played for 4 years at Montclair, and had a decent career for me. Like I said, I kind of overachieved. I don't think I was really a college level player, but I played in like almost 30 games. I played a lot of specials. Siri got me in a lot. My senior year, was on the punt team and on the kickoff return team. So got a little bit of time, and I enjoyed that. And it's funny now as a head coach, because I get guys that come and sit down with me and they're like, hey, like I'm upset about playing time. And I'm like, I hear you.
Different perspective, bro.
Yeah. I mean, I played for 4 years and never started a game. But, that's for me, like in the moment, I was upset. I wanted to play more, because what kid doesn't? That's in the moment.
100%.
But looking back on it, like I said, I think I overachieved. I did something that probably most people aren't able to do, play college football. So, and the great part was, during that time, my 4 years there playing, we were 36-9.
Dominant.
We won the NJAC in 2009. We tied, a three-way tie in 2010, went to the playoffs both those years. And then my senior year, 2011, we were one of the best teams in the country. And then we just went, Kane came up to our place and knocked us off. And it was kind of a big moment for Coach Garrett and that crew.
Huge.
Yeah, kind of put them, in the mix for the NJAC. So, we were really a dominant team. And, it was great to be a part of that. It's legendary players that I played with. I mean, like I said,
you played with some dogs. I mean, but listen, you also, like you said, you had some deep runs into the playoffs, like very successful. I think you lost 1 year to Mount Union, right? Like when they were rocking and rolling. You had a great career, but now that starts to come to an end, right? And now it's like, okay, well, now what do I do?
Yeah, and I was fortunate because I know like senior day is tough for a lot of kids, and there's a lot of tears on senior day because it's like that moment. And for us, senior day was a crushing game. We lose to Kane in the NJAC championship, and we win, we move on, and that's a tough thing because it's one thing when you're kind of not good and you're going into that last game. You're like,
you know it.
Game is like we win, we go back to the playoffs again, and that was just what we were used to at that point. And then for us to lose, like it was a really upsetting day. But for me, I was a little more equipped to handle it because I had football taken away from me. You
already knew what it was like to lose that thing at one point. You know what I'm saying? So your whole perspective was totally different.
Right.
Like, I mean, I remember my senior day, dude. Like, I knew it was like, hey, this is the ECAC Bowl against Albright, bro. This is the last hurrah. This is what we're doing. Like, don't give up a freaking big play. Like, don't go out the way, just don't go out that way. Just go out there, do it, do everything you need to. And it's really hard for the younger guys on the roster to kind of get that whole senior day vibe in terms of that, because it's like, oh, well, I got this next year. It's like at one point, man, like it's going to come to an end for you too. And it's tough, especially because most of these guys, it's what they've been doing for years, right? It's all we've ever done. We knew come August, we were starting camp, by November it was end. I mean, this was just what you did. And now to have that stuff taken away, now you got to take a step back and reevaluate, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah, it's tough. And like you said, for some guys, a lot of guys, most of the guys that play for me, this is every fall they've played football since they can remember.
Yeah, man.
And that's your identity. That's who you become. And it's a tough thing to let go of. So yeah, senior day stuff. And I always tell my guys, man, if I can get the whole team to play with that senior mentality, that mentality of, I know this is it. I know this is coming to an end.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, I got to give this my best effort, man, you could be a really good football team. So I bring that up a lot to our guys. But yeah, I mean, it was funny after my senior day, game ends, guys upset, we lose, and Siri just looks to me and goes, "Well, you'll be back next year. You'll just be wearing a headset," in the typical Siri fashion. So
100%, you knew.
Yeah, I kind of knew that was the case, and then I went into that next year. I was an assistant coach. I was actually the O-line assistant for Coach G. And man, again, you think you know what you're doing, you have no idea. I got paid $1,500 for the whole season. It's a real nice chunk of change.
We're talking D3 money, people. Like, you want to talk all this NIL stuff and whatever, and like, coming up the ranks and all that other kind of stuff. Like, this is what we're talking about. Okay. We're talking about a guy who literally puts in more hours than players, right? Like, and that's what he's getting salary wise. So you want to talk about love of the game? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, I mean, I moved, I had an apartment. I was renting a basement room up in Little Falls. Had some college roommates that were in the house above me. It's like, well, I want to coach. I'm working side jobs. I'm substitute teaching. I'm making this work. And I'm like, well, I want to coach college football. So I was with Montclair for 2 years. I did get a pay raise my second year. I think I got up to about $2,400.
Big time, bro. You're making big money.
Yep. Balling. It was funny. The first year after taxes, I think I got two $600 paychecks, and my rent was $550. So I just basically took my paycheck and just handed it to my landlord. I was like,
and people always ask me, and they say, "Yo, man, like, why, you should just go coach at Montclair, go coach at Keene, or go coach at, go coach at a D3, go coach at some of these areas." And it's like, buddy, if you're like, it's first off, it's never about money, but like, you make more money coaching high school football than you do coaching college football. And if you want to talk time restraints and time aspect of it, like, it's not even close. So you tell me, do you love it? And do you really want to get into it, or are you just there because you want to wear the polo? Because there's a big difference.
No doubt. And guys struggle with that now. I mean, that's a big thing is
I can see that.
They coach college ball, but they really don't know. And like you said, it can't be about the money. And that's okay if it is. Like, if you got stuff that you have to do, like
correct. Like, you might have a family to take care of, right? Like, you might have certain situations that, like, understand, like, I understand why you're doing that, or like what you need to do, but like, that can't happen. Like, it really just can't happen. So this might not be for you.
Yeah. And I remember, Todd Agresta and all the talks we had over the years, he would tell me, he's like, look, don't start teaching, don't start getting into a job, because if you do, then you're not going to be able to take the pay cut to coach college.
100%.
Is exactly what happened to me. So I coached in 2012, 2013. I bartended down the shore. I'm substitute teaching. I coach track in the off season. I'm doing all the jobs to make it work. And I was in my, early 20s, and I was energetic. So I could go a couple sleepless nights going from the bar to practice and track practice or whatever it is, making it all work. And then, long story short, took a little time off from school. I didn't finish my degree right away. I finished my degree in the spring of 2014. So going into the fall of 2014, I had planned on doing one more season at Montclair. Now I have my undergrad degree. I'm going to look to try to GA and try to move on. And I felt like, wow, like off 3 years of coaching experience at the D3 level, I should be hopefully an attractive candidate for something. And I'm looking at this scoop, and I'm just trying to find jobs and just keep my eyes open. And one popped up for an unpaid quality control coach at Towson University. Now, 2013, Towson played in the national championship game. They had Terrence West, who was a draft pick and was the FCS.
No, they were big. They were legit.
Legit. So, one night I just said, you know what? I'll throw my resume in here. And I threw my resume in and didn't hear back. It was like July. Didn't hear anything back. I just moved. I mean, I threw my resume out to a couple things. So, I hadn't heard from a bunch of people. So I was like, whatever, just one of those things. And I get a call like a week before we were supposed to go to camp, a week before Montclair camp opened. And it was the defense coordinator from Towson, Matt Hackman, great dude. And he just starts selling me the job, like basically like trying to get me to go. So clearly they had somebody else that fell through. And man, like, what a difficult decision. Like, I'm in my life, and you think you're doing this, you're going down this road, and then all of a sudden you get this phone call. And to the people that don't coach ball, how are you supposed to explain? Yeah, I'm going to pick up my life.
Literally.
I'm going to move to Towson for an unpaid job.
Yep. I'm moving to Maryland with nothing. For nothing.
Nothing. And, like my parents are great, supportive, but even that was kind of like, all right, well, where are you going to live? And I'm like, well,
right. Like what, there's logistics to this. It sounds great, but like, we got to put something on paper.
But, just talking to people and the reputation that Towson had at that point. I mean, literally coming off a national championship loss, it's like, man, like what an experience that I can have here.
You got to take this shot.
Yeah. And I actually, there's some people, I was dating a girl at the time who, was not happy about it. And, I had to make that probably one of the most difficult decisions of my life to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give up everything else. And, it's tough to talk to Coach G and tell them, but, Coach was,
especially a week before camp.
Yeah, a week before camp. I mean, I really put those guys in a bind. And, there was a student assistant. I did all the video coordinating stuff.
Right. Like I see what people don't understand is like you wore so many hats, right? Like to lose, and especially at a D3 level, like especially when you're getting ready for camp, like, dude, everything has to be laid out. Everything's got to be whatever. Like you handled a lot of that stuff, and it was kind of like, all right, well, Coach Palazzo check that box. Coach Palazzo check that box. Like I'm sure you left, and it was like, oh my gosh, how do we handle this? Where are we going to plug this stuff in? Yeah. But look, you made a big boy decision. So now you're down at Towson, right? Which great program. You're in the DMV, right? Maryland, high level FCS. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was culture shock for me because my whole life, college football, all I knew was Montclair State. So going down to Towson, first of all, I asked the coach at Towson, Coach Ackman, I said, look, I'll take this job, but you got to give me a week. I got to move out of my old apartment. I got to do a couple of things. And he was fine with it. So, I bought a shower rack. I bought drawers, and I loaded up the back of my Jeep Wrangler. I had the shower rack across the top. I hung all my clothes in it, put the drawers in. I put my socks, my underwear in the drawers. And literally that's where I was living. I was living out of the back of my Jeep. I had an air mattress. They told me I could blow it up at night and sleep in the office. And that's what I did. And it was that first night when you go to bed and you're like on an air mattress in Maryland and you know nobody, that is is a really, like when you turn those lights off and you're like, man, did I just make the right decision? Like I'm on a floor in Maryland and I know nobody. But
with nothing, it was like, you know what I mean? Like, no, like, I know this is what I want to do, but how am I going to execute this? Right. Like, cause right now I'm sleeping on a floor.
I'm sleeping on a floor on an air mattress. And, it was a lonely night that first night, but, you just learn so much. I mean, just being there and like, really, if you backtrack, I only spent 1 year at Towson. I came back to Montclair, got hired full time, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if I stayed in Montclair, I probably still might get that full time job. But what a great experience to do what I did for a year at Towson because I met some lifelong friends. I mean,
absolutely.
Defense coordinator at Strasburg, Mike Lackey, is one of my best friends. We talk all the time, and we were the two quality control coaches together. And actually, he made my life a lot easier because come, October, we started getting close. He lived locally and he started letting me stay in his sister's room. So I had a bed to sleep in that wasn't on the floor.
Must be amazing.
Yeah. And just the networking. I mean, I still talk to a lot of those guys, Coach Hack, I see around, Coach Ambrose, the head coach, he's at Maryland now. We still stay in touch. And I when I got the head job in Montclair, I called him and, I shot him a text a couple of times, just laughing about a couple of things that he used to say that I just didn't get as a young coach. But now I'm like, man, I totally get it. And it was a great experience. I mean, we played West Virginia week 2. We got beat up pretty bad, but just being in that stadium and being a part of D1 life, it was cool. It was cool. And also really, it let me kind of hone in on what I wanted to do because being at the D1 level is great. It's fun. And when you're a young coach, it's awesome. And for some guys, they love that thrill of that next job and that chase. But that also, for me, being there and seeing, just kind of how things are, like, I really value D3 because I'm like, I can have a little bit of quality of life. I can root. I can be in one place. I can hopefully stay for a while and I can build my own life and, still be able to coach ball, still be able to coach college athletes, which is obviously something I wanted to do, but, not that crazy, you might get fired tomorrow and you got to get on a plane and move here and move there. And,
and it's only gotten crazier.
It's worse. Yeah, it's worse. And I think something, we'll get into that conversation later, but I think the bubble is going to burst at some point because I think it's getting harder and harder for that coach.
I just don't know if it's sustainable with the current model that they have, going on.
No. So, but yeah, great experience. And then after the season, I come home and Montclair that spring finally opened up a third full-time position, completely new.
Which was a big move for them, right? Yeah. Because up until that point, and that was
15.
So 2015, finally, Montclair adds a third full-time head coach. And look, we basically had 3 full-time coaches. Coach G is the head coach. Coach O'Connor was the offensive coordinator throughout my years. And then Coach Agresta. Now, look, he wasn't full-time, but he was full-time, right? Like he kind of supplement. Now, it might not have been with his income, right? Because that poor guy had to work more jobs and do whatever. But that was his office. He was in that place, right? And those kind of 3 were the figureheads going in there. Now, Montclair opens up a full-time gig. Okay, bring back Coach Palazzo. Here we go, buddy.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I think Agresta would have loved to take that job and be a full-time coach. But at that point, he was so far advanced in his teaching career.
Pay cut.
Yep. So I get the job at Montclair, and it was like, the movie like Beer Fest with Landfill. Like they just put me back in the same spot. Like, it's like, boom, now I'm getting a salary, I'm getting benefits, but I'm the exact same coach. Like taking over video again. I went back to tight ends coach, which is what I was in 2013. And it was really funny because I have so much respect for Coach O and Coach G and what they did because, you know what, they didn't really even know what to do with me because they were just so used to doing
just the 2 of them.
2 of them that it's not like they were like, you know what, we're going to delegate this to you or delegate that to you. It was just like, we're doing our thing. You got an office next door, go coach football. So I make the joke all the time. I was like the highest paid tight ends coach in college football because I'm a full-time salary guy, but like I'm doing play cards and just kind of
doing GA work.
Yeah, doing GA work because the recruiting was done, the day-to-day was done. They didn't hire me officially till July, so
right. And so that's kind of like the lull, if for people that don't understand, like that's kind of the lull before. And with D3, not a lot of guys stay on campus and work out and do that kind of stuff like they do at their 1As. You know what I'm saying? Or at the big time programs. Like that just wasn't something that happened, dude. So that time is really when coaches kind of, all right. And like Coach Palazzo said, like quality of life where you can actually have a family and kind of do those things. And that's kind of the time where that stuff takes place, right? Pre-camp.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on vacations and stuff like that. And for me, like, this was my first full-time job. So, and those guys, I make the joke all the time. Like those guys, I felt weird if I got there at 8:05. Like those guys in there 8 a.m. on the dot, probably before that. But I never could beat those guys to the office ever. You never beat Coach A, Coach O, Coach G because they're from a different time,
different era, brother. And we're gonna get into it.
Those guys, when they worked, number one, they were just so professional. But number two, you had to be in the office to do your job. There was no huddle when they started. There was no, podcast. There was no Zoom.
There's no Zoom links. There's no none of this. There's no none of that. Like everything was, dude, you got to be there.
You got to be there. And that's just the era they came from. So it's funny because, like, it's my first full-time job. I think I'm 25, 26. And, I'm stressing out at July 15th at 8 a.m. because I'm running late. I'm like, oh no, like they're going to look at me crazy. The first 3 weeks, because again, those guys are just a different breed. Like they didn't eat lunch. They just sat there, just drank black coffee, just grinded film. So I go to the office and say, hey, can I go grab lunch? And the first week goes by and finally Coach O just you know how the office was set up. Coach O just spins in his chair and just goes, Mike, you don't have to ask us permission to get lunch. I was like, okay, thank you. So I just would, grab lunch on my own finally. But yeah, so
it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's good. I'm glad that I had that opportunity to come up like that because,
absolutely,
you see that level of professionalism, you see that level of dedication.
Right.
And yeah, do I do things a little bit differently? Absolutely, because of the technology. But, the dedication to the career, to get the dedication to the program, it was second to none. So, I'm glad I got to experience Coach O and Coach G on a full-time level, because then right after that season, Coach O retired. And that spun, turned the whole program upside down, because, that was like Coach G cutting off his left hand. I mean, Coach O was just
Literally.
always, yeah.
I mean, they finished each other's sentences, right? And we referenced it a little bit when we had Coach O on. Coach G and Coach O, like, they were, baseball assistants together. Like, they had come up through the whole thing together. You know what I'm saying? So, that being said, now you throw a third, person into this mix that really wasn't. I mean, look, and for people that don't know, like, the offices were set up, like Coach O and Coach G were in like the same office. You know what I'm saying? And then Todd was Coach Agresta was kind of downstairs in the defensive, office. And that was just different. So those guys just kind of always did their own thing. But now you come into this mix, right? And this is where I kind of want to transition. Like, now, okay, you're there, full-time coach, you did it. And look, you and I have spoken since, forever, right? Through your playing career, through this, through that. Like, I always told you, I thought the greatest thing you ever did was go down there to Maryland and down in Towson and have that experience, no matter how crazy it was, because you just needed to see something different, right? You needed to put yourself in a different place, a different level. Think about, it's just, to me, it was always the best move for you personally. But now you come back, and now look, here you are, right? 2024, and you're the head coach of Montclair State, dude. And Coach G, we all know, legend, 30-something years in the game, all this kind of stuff. What is it like having to take that over, right? I mean, like, where you knew you wanted to be a head coach or a coach, but did you ever think you were going to get that opportunity at Montclair State? And then when you did, like, what is that like? Just give us a little background on there. Kind of tell me what you kind of went through that whole process.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I was fortunate because towards the end, before Coach G retired, he started giving me more and more. So the transition is probably the easiest transition that anybody could ever have, going from, assistant coach to being the first time head coach. Like, there was no surprises, none. I mean, budget, scheduling, doing all that stuff. Like, Coach G, gave a lot of it to me. Some of it was just because it involved technology and he didn't want to use that. So he's like, Mike, take care of this. So it was
right. Because I mean, you're talking to a guy that started with, like, I don't freaking know. Like, this was, dude, like, it's, like, reels, dude. Like, like, and now all of a sudden it's like, Coach, here's this player. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, how about this? I'll give you a little technology for Coach G and one of his little things that he did. Coach would always draw every play to the right. I don't know if you ever noticed
always.
That, but like every play was to the right. And I forget who it was, or maybe it was just one of his stories he told me. But he's like, yeah, I draw everything to the right because when I started coaching, when we do clinics or presentations, we would have the overhead projectors and the transparent paper. He goes, so I'll just draw it to the right, and then I'll flip it over, and it was all to the left.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why he drew it to the right. That's how different technology is now. You know what I mean? It's like, that's
absolutely
why he
crazy.
did that. And it's like every day.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's
so yeah, I mean, I was fortunate that a lot of those things, like, as far as being a head coach logistically were familiar for me. So I was able to do that. And, I think Coach was always talking about retirement. Some years it came up a little bit more than others. In 2017, he seriously considered it. And then he got a little motivated and decided to come back. And it was funny because 2018 was probably one of the better years we've had. So, I put myself in that mindset for a couple of years. G's gonna retire. So if I get the opportunity to be the head coach here, what am I going to do? And I think something for me that was really important was, don't try to be Coach G. Just be myself, and I'm a different person than Coach, and Coach and I, worked together for a long time, and I love him and I adore him. He's like, I didn't grow up with grandfathers, so Coach is probably the closest thing I ever had to a grandfather. But I still have to be me. I have to be Mike Palazzo. I can't be Coach G. And that was something that I just would always take a deep breath on when I'm in the office or whatever. It's like, hey, like, do this the way you think handles best. Do it from your training, what Coach G taught you, but also do it your way. And that's what I've tried to do. And I try to be myself just around my players and be myself around recruits. Like if I could say one thing, I believe it. I think if you ask any player on the team or any recruit, like I'm not talking to you any differently than I talk to anybody else. You know, a lot of coaches are salesmen. A lot of coaches,
Oh yeah, buddy.
they'll go into a school and they'll recruit, and that's their job. And I get it. And we are salesmen, but I just don't feel that's right for me. And I'm fortunate because I'm selling something that I know so much about. I spent half of my life at Montclair State University. Literally, I started there when I was a 17-year-old freshman, and that's been part of my life now. I'm 35. So half of my life has been spent one university. I have 2 college degrees from there. So it's something that I can talk about easily. And I think that makes me a better coach and better recruiter at Montclair. And, just being yourself every day. So I've learned that. And that's kind of what I tell myself every day is when, the subject of, well, what's it like taking over for Coach G? That's what I try to do. And the core values and the beliefs that Coach G had, I think we continue and we have, just doing it the way that I think's best. And maybe some of those things are a little bit different, but that doesn't make it good or bad. It's just different.
Right. And look, and I think it's a great on your part. Look, at the end of the day, everybody, and I've always been a firm believer in this when it comes to, my coaching philosophy or just, when guys ask me like, what should you do? You got to be you, right? You have to be yourself. You can't come every day to the office trying to be something that you're not. You're force feeding something, right? You're trying to do this, you're trying to do that because, well, this guy did it that way or this guy did it that way. Like players see right through the bullshit, bro. Right? I mean, they're going to know like this guy's full of shit. Like he's faking it. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't do that. And then, that's the first thing is your players are going to see right through it. And then second, like you're going to be so unhappy trying to be something that you're not, that eventually it's just going to be a negative outcome altogether. Right. And I think the great thing about football and football coaching staffs is that everybody has an overall view and way of doing things. Like we're doing this the program way. But I also feel like the best staff allow the guys underneath them to be who they are and coach the way they are. Right. And I think for you as the head coach, right, how do you handle that? How do you handle assistant coaches? Well, first off, how do you get assistant coaches? Right. Because it's very different and difficult to dedicate that time and all that kind of stuff. And then 2, how do you handle those different personalities?
Yeah, it's not easy. And everybody comes in from different backgrounds. And I think the hard part is what guys don't understand at this level, right? And I can get to a long spiel about all this, but I want to make sure I cover some points. But a big thing is people don't understand that coaching college football at the Division III level is very hard because my ability to pay my mortgage relies on this job, right? Whereas a lot of coaches, assistant coaches, they're making a stipend, and I'm not trying to take anything away. It means a lot to them, but it's not their career. It's not their main job. And coaches sometimes will get frustrated because they want to be a college coach and they want to have all this input, but it's like, hey man, I'm in the office every day from, whatever to whatever. And, you got to focus on other things. So maybe you're not going to have as much input on what we're trying to do.
Right.
That's okay. It's not a bad thing, but I think some guys do struggle with that. So
absolutely. Listen, coaches, we're all like, we all want it our way, or we want to do it this way, or we have this, we should have this much input, or I feel this or that, or, you know what I mean? You want to express that stuff, but at the same time, like that's literally what I say to people. Right. And they're like, college coach, high school coach. I said, college coaches, like putting food on the table for their kids depends on an 18-year-old playing a game, like, and how well they play it. Like, so when guys talk about recruiting or this, my kid should have a scholarship. Well, are you willing to take your full-time salary, right, from your full-time job? Are you willing to risk that on your son playing at this school, right? Ask him, you know what I mean? And then it's, well, yeah, because that's what I'm doing by giving your son that scholarship, right? So I think that's a tough thing, especially at the D3 level, because guys think college football, I should be making all this stuff. And it's like, you're a stipend coach, man. Like,
yeah. And I think that, so the first step really is trying to get to know the coaches that you hire. I mean, I got a great staff. I'm so lucky. And it happens organically. Like, it just kind of was like, well, we got one coach and then he knew somebody and I called that guy and so on and so forth. But you just can't have an ego, and you have to be here for the right reasons. Like, look, don't get into college football because you're like, I want to be this great coach and I want to win and I want to have all these championships and up to my name. No, like you got to get into coaching because you like being around kids of that age and you like trying to help them become better people. I mean, that's the bottom line. And if you do that, I think the wins and the championships will come. And you just have to have your ego aside. Like, it's about the kids. It's about the players. It's not about any type of wins or championships. That was a weird part for me being, I mean, look, who doesn't like it when, you get a little, like, people put a little bit on you. But me as a first-year coach, getting that job, especially taking over for G and as big as that was made out to be, like, people asking to interview me and asking to do these things and that's things.
oh, sure.
Really, can I get Nick Burgess over here? Can I get Henry Lewis over here? Like, let them talk. They're the players. They're the ones experiencing
Exactly. It's about them, not me.
It is a little awkward at times, but you can't have an ego in this. And if you do this for an ego, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think, at the highest levels, that's kind of what you're seeing. Like, some of those guys, man, it's like, hey, man, I win all these championships. I go and I change programs wherever I go. And from the outside looking in, it looks like it's a lot of ego related. I don't know, and hopefully those guys are doing right by their players in the program. I find it.
I also think it's different levels too. You know what I'm saying, dude? Like, you know what I mean? Like, these guys, some of these guys are in the NFL, high level college. Like, there's just so many pieces to the puzzle and the behind the scenes that nobody really sees, or, you know what I mean? Especially now with, the way recruiting's going and the NIL stuff, like, you're now seeing staffs at the higher level just change. I mean, Coach Schumann and I have talked about it numerous times, how you're seeing, like, it's no longer just a head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, position coaches. No, man, you're having like entire staff of media people or social media people, NIL deal stuff, like all of these, like, the collective aspect of it, the marketing aspect of it, like, staffs are now increasing to so many more roles that are vital off the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have any of that at D3. So
that's what, and that's like, I'm like, you know what I mean? That's why you're referencing it in terms of, like, these guys D3 wear numerous hats, bro. Like, you're coaching, and I know, like, for you, like, you were, it was all right. He's a position coach, but he's also doing the video stuff, and he's doing, he's touring kids, and then he's talking to admissions, and he's working with grades, and he's handling, this alumni thing, right? And it's just so much that goes into it, and especially without that ability to just delegate to other full-time guys, like, oh, this is your job, that's your job. Like, no. And especially you, I just feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, having come up the way you came up, right, has only helped you now as a head coach. Like, oh, I've done that, right? Or, oh, I've been in that role, right? And, oh, okay, Coach G did it this way, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit and kind of go this way.
Yeah.
Which I think I think that's been huge, right? I also think, for a while, there was a lot of like, when's Coach G going to hang it up, right? Like, hey, I don't know if I want to go to Montclair because I don't know if Coach is even going to be here or kind of, some of that type of stuff. Like, I don't know, it might have hurt. You can tell me better. I mean, it might have hurt recruiting when it came to it. Like, something different needs to happen. So now, like, here you come, right? A new shiny spark, like, here's a spark, right? Like, is there one thing that when you became head coach, you were like, it was the one thing that you were like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this? I know it's a tough one, dude. I had to throw you one. I had to throw you one.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I think the hard part is this, right? When you're an assistant coach, you're always the toughest talking guy in the room, right? It's so easy. I mean, look at us on Sundays. We watch the NFL, like, yo, what are they doing? Like, why do they run that play? Like, come on, man. We all know.
We should know this, bro.
Yeah, no doubt. So I think like the hardest part is when you're actually in that decision-making chair, and maybe not so much the X's and O's and those decisions, because you still prepare for that. And I think for us in a lot of close games, or a lot of games we had this year, I think they were kind of decided. So I think the hard part is your toughest talking guy in the room when you're assistant coach, and you're like, this kid, I'm going to kick this kid off because he's cancerous. He doesn't help the team. He's not a good football player. But then when you're sitting in that chair and it's one-on-one with an 18 to 21-year-old young man who just doesn't know how to express himself, or doesn't do things the right way, but you're like, look, I can still help this kid.
Yeah, man.
And when you're assistant coach, it's like, yeah, get rid of him. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And now it's like, I'm looking across man to man with this kid, and this kid's, maybe tears streaming down his face. And it's like, yeah, like you're not doing the right things. That's the hard part, is holding that accountability, and being able to sometimes having to be the bad guy a little bit and say, hey, look, this is not working out.
Got it.
That's the hardest part. That to me was one of the toughest things coming in. I think it's still something I struggle with all the time. But what I go back to is just being a good communicator, putting things.
I think that's the most important thing too, dude. Communication, right? Especially with the way things are now. Like, I knew I was only going to talk to my coaches when I was in the building. You know what I'm saying? Like now, that open line of communication, it's infinite. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just totally different. Like I can talk to my players if they wanted to, could talk to me anytime they wanted to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to get some sleep sometimes. So I tell guys, like, you text me after 10, it's questionable if I'm going to respond, but I'll get the text. I'll get back to you in the morning.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, communication is so important. And the thing is too, like what I try to do as a head coach is, don't get mad at a kid for doing something you would have done or did. Like I pushed the limits as a college athlete. Like I was a college kid, doing all the college kid things. So yeah, I know that. And I was a little bit younger than you, so I probably didn't see as much, but I know you're pretty crazy. So, a kid makes a mistake, You got to hold them accountable. You got to make them understand why you can't do those things. But if there's something that I would have done, like, I'm not going to berate the kid. I'm not going to bring him in the office and blast him. I'm going to make sure he understands.
You got to do it in the right way. And I think, like you said, the communication aspect is part of that, right? And if you set those standards like you have, right, and like the program has itself, like those guys will understand it. And then that kid that's sitting across from you who just did, something stupid, now you have that conversation, give him that second chance. Now he straightens out. And now what happens is down the road as he becomes, a junior, a senior, right? And something else happens with a freshman or a sophomore. Now he polices that before it gets to you because you've instilled those values.
No doubt.
And by giving him a second chance, you've really given him like another opportunity, dude, which is absolutely phenomenal. And like, again, we can go back to it and say what it is, but like now you sit there and you look at it, say like Coach G, for 30 years he did that. And you're like, wow, how many guys did he have to be like, all right, here's your second chance, or nope, you got to go. Like, I just can't even, I look at that all the time and think like, it's crazy to me.
Yeah. It's for a long time he did it, and I always, like I said, being the toughest talking guy next door, I'm in the other office, and I'm like, yeah, just cut him.
Get rid of him, bro. Like he doesn't do anything for us anyway. Like, come on, man. This is the second time he did this dumb. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and look, I dealt with a way different roster than that's there now. You know what I'm saying? Like we had a lot of those aspects of like, and Coach G was always the guy that was known for taking risks on players, right? Like, hey, this guy may have not done the right thing, but you know what? Let's give him an opportunity. And if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, we'll separate and kind of do what we can. But one more thing, brother, before I let you go, talk right now, because obviously it's the whole big, all this craziness going on with recruiting, NIL. Explain the D3 world when it comes to that aspect. Maybe kind of take an angle, like, talk about what you're looking for at Montclair in terms of, look, we know measurables and all that other kind of stuff, but like, give me what you would look for in a guy that's going to come to Montclair State. First off, give them the rules, because NJAC isn't exactly like, you can't just bring in 300 dudes to a roster and expect like, hey, we're going to be able to plug and play whoever we want here. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're allowed 135. That's our conference rule. Now, other schools may have a school imposed rule. Like I know some of the schools in New Jersey probably come in with a little bit less than that. But I'm fortunate.
Yeah, I
I'm in,
think like 125 I've heard maybe or something, 120.
yeah, it's funny because you don't realize it, but a lot of times it just comes down to locker space. Like how many lockers do you have in your locker room?
Literally. See,
Literally.
people, D3 world, people, like D3 football is different.
Yeah. But fortunately for us, we have 137 lockers in our locker room.
Nice.
So we have plenty of room for guys, and the administration lets me bring that in. And I want to have a full roster. That's my belief. Yeah, there's a lot of headaches sometimes that can come with it, but I try to look at the trends. I try to look at what makes teams good, what makes D3 teams good. And you mentioned way back we played Mount Union. They had 200 guys in their roster, and they had A team, B team, C team, freshman team, JV team. I mean, just crazy. And that's to me
Totally
what makes teams successful is just having a lot of guys and be able to withstand a long season and be able to handle attrition. So
yeah, especially a D3 season that like look, you play your regular season, then you have D3 playoffs, which go a whole other, you know what I mean? The Stag Bowl is in December.
Yeah, it's a half season. So, I've looked at that. I've studied those trends. What makes teams good? Like look at the teams just that I know we've played. I'm not even looking at schools that I have no idea about, but we play good teams, better teams that we end up getting scheduled against or whatever. They have a lot of guys, and it's tough because you're managing 135 personalities where you can go 100 and manage 100. But I've always felt like you can practice differently when you have enough players, and you're gonna get guys that maybe you didn't think you would have prior. Like every year we'll take a kid who, maybe he wasn't the most highly recruited kid or XYZ, but for one reason or another with a trait, we take that kid and then you watch him. I say, wow, this kid's really good. I mean, Nick Burgess, I messaged him before. He's one of our better players. He was a middle linebacker for us last year, was NJAC Player of the Year on defense. He called me in like July. And I was like, hey, I don't really have room for you. And that's true. Like we were kind of just tight on roster space, but we made it work. He didn't play as a freshman, but he's been one of our best defensive football players the last 2 years, and we get him for one more next year. That's a kid that if you're limiting your roster and you're only going with 100, you're not getting that kid.
Yeah, man.
And we're very fortunate to have him and guys like that. So yeah, I mean we're allowed 135. For me taking over as head coach, one thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get recruiting a little more streamlined because we have such a COVID bubble this year, which is a good thing for us. And I'm excited for what's going to happen this year. We have 45 seniors.
It's insane.
Your class, I remember seeing the picture.
Oh, bro. Look at it right now. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Yeah, I think we had like 24, 26 seniors. Yeah. And that was huge. Like that was a monster roster, right? Yeah. But, people don't understand how this works too. Like just because it's like, oh, I'm a senior, it doesn't mean you've done like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, 4 years, and like that's it. Like there's a lot of stuff. And now you add COVID into it. I believe this is the last year of COVID eligibility or whatnot.
Yep.
So, yeah, because I think these seniors in high school, like, they missed their 8th grade year, I think it was. I think that's what it was or something of that nature.
Something like that. I mean, all I know is this is the last year of COVID years. So we have about like 10 to 12 fifth years, and then the rest are our fourth years. But here's the thing. This is how this all worked out. It's kind of like a weird – I try to have to, as a head coach, like I don't coach a position. Recruiting is my baby. And this is something that I've studied and tried to make sure that we're good at. But 2021 was the year after COVID. We have 39 guys on the roster that played for us in 2019 going into 2021. So if you think about it, we have 135 players and almost 100 guys on that roster did not ever go through a college camp because COVID year was a crazy year and all that.
Yeah, it doesn't even count.
Yeah. So, like, for us, we brought in 2021, 80 players, 80 freshmen and transfers in 2021. So
it's like a reset.
We're still reset. And it was just, for me as a recruiter, and I was the recruiting coordinator for Coach G, like, hey man, we got to make sure we got bodies, and might take our lumps. I thought we would be a little bit better in 21 than we ended up being, because we did have some fifth year seniors that came back, but we had a lot of freshmen, and special teams was all freshmen. We had some freshmen that were working their way in, that got some starting jobs in 2021, and then now we're at the year 4 of those guys. So ideally, I want to get us to the point of we're only looking to bring in 24 to 30 guys every fall. Like that's a nice number, and that means your attrition rate's good. That means your graduation rate's good, and that's my main focus, is to try to get that back on track. But it wasn't like a thing where our attrition rate was poor. It was just COVID was such a crazy situation that affected us.
Insanity. It was just wild in general for everybody, right? Like, so to see, listen, so you took over as head coach, like, and now all of a sudden, now you're dealing with COVID, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was before me. I mean, that was Coach G was still the head coach.
But like, you're still dealing with the remnants of it, right? Your first season was what? You got the job officially when? You were hired when?
As head coach?
Head coach.
Yeah, so spring of last year. So I've been the head coach for like 18 months now.
Yeah, buddy.
I just finished my second spring, going into my second fall. Yeah, and we're still dealing with that stuff. And I think the hard part last spring was to try to establish the standards that I want. And now I think that's a little bit easier. So now I'm just trying to work through the COVID stuff, and it's tough because I was a undersized guy that got an opportunity to play. And I have to turn a lot of guys away right now that maybe would be in a similar situation because we just don't have the room. And I'm trying to get it so that the freshmen who come in, maybe as a sophomore, they could start, because we got 45 seniors leaving. So,
I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I don't want to ever count on freshmen. And I tell freshmen that in the recruiting process, like, look, I don't want to say, hey, I'm recruiting you to be a starter, because if you do that, you're probably not very good. If you're counting on an 18-year-old kid that's never played college football before to be the difference maker, you're probably, maybe that kid's really good, but you're probably not a very good football program at that point.
Yeah, like maybe he could have a role, right? Like maybe he could run around, like, okay, maybe he's a kick returner, maybe he's a punt returner, maybe he's a specialist, like, but for him to come in and say, hey, man, I want you to be a starting linebacker as a freshman, like, what are we talking about here?
Exactly. And I think that's one thing in recruiting that I try to do, and Coach G taught me this, and something I really believe in. Like, look, be transparent in recruiting. Let them pick the school, let them pick Montclair State for the right reasons. Yep. Don't say, hey, man, you're going to be a starter, or I'm going to give you number 5.
Don't bullshit.
Yeah. And I think I don't know what other schools do. I've heard some things. It's always kind of secondhand, but that's the way I try to do it. I pride ourselves on that. And I tell my assistant coaches the same thing. Like, don't promise anything. Tell them all the good stuff and tell them the bad.
How does that work? To do assistants? How do you do it with that? Like, obviously you're the main guy, right? Coach Sharapa, right, is your offensive coordinator. So he's your other full-time. And then you have another full-time?
Yeah. So Coach Nelson, who played for us.
I remember the name.
Yeah. So he was a linebacker for us he actually was at FDU, transferred to us as a sophomore, played for 3 years. He was 16, 17, 18 for us. So his senior year was the year we were 8-2, pretty good. He coached for us for a year in 19, and then he went on through my Towson connections. Again, it's all connected. And he was a GA and then the linebackers coach at East Stroudsburg for the last few years.
Very nice.
When our DC job opened back up, brought him in, and he's a younger guy. I think he's 27. I should probably know that.
Hell, bro. He's probably like shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
But
everybody's younger than us now, though, bro. So and us, I mean me, not you.
Well, I'm catching up to you. So, but he took his lumps as a first-year DC. But what I was so excited about is you hire the person, you teach the skill, and he knew our defense. We've kept a lot of similar principles that Agresta had and everything. But now he's in a full off season, so I'm really excited to see what our defense can do. I think it's really going to flourish that he's more comfortable in that role.
Yes.
So those two guys are my main recruiters, and myself. I go on the road. I love recruiting.
That's what I was just about to ask you. Like,
I'm not one of those guys that doesn't want to go on the road as a head coach. Like, I last week I was down in Atlantic County, and I love getting out there. I love meeting people. I love the networking aspect of it.
And it's so different.
Yeah, and it's fun. It kind of gives you a break from the monotony of just sitting in the office every day. You have an opportunity to, and then like if I have to be on campus for a meeting or something, I hit Cedar Grove, I hit Caldwell, I hit local schools, and then I have some opportunities to go down south and go down there and recruit. Right. So I love it. And us three are the main guys that recruit. Now, kind of getting back to what we were saying before about having assistant coaches, I try to be really realistic with my expectations of those guys.
Right.
I don't expect them to go out and recruit as many guys as I do. That's not their job. Like they have to worry about other things. So, I'll give those guys some schools to talk to and make some connections at, especially if maybe they had a hookup somewhere.
Oh, like maybe networks. You know how it is. That's important.
But basically, like my goal for those guys as part-time coaches and assistants is just get the names and get the kids into the funnel, and then we'll try to take it from there. Like, if you have a really, really good connection with a kid as a part-time coach, by all means, let's go. Let's bring them in. But I'm not trying to put that on those guys because they have so much other things to worry about. And at the end of the day, like, they got to do their job, and that's not recruiting for Montclair State. So, the big part of recruiting falls on the three full-time coaches that we have. And I think that also makes it an attractive job, I think, for some guys because, I'm trying to be realistic with the hours. I'm trying to be realistic with the recruiting. I'm trying to be realistic with the offseason because, we're not, like you said, we're not paying guys as much as sometimes high school jobs. And what high school job, you can get a good high school job that, you wrap it up in early October or late October.
And that was a tough saying, guys. It was like, thanks for the effort. Like, but I will tell you this, being in the high school world and all this stuff now, like the amount of time that now has to be, that is now, I guess, expected of you, right? Like it's not a hobby job anymore, man. Like you're no longer seeing players from August to December. That's not it. It is a 365-day year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you want to do it the right way. And if you want your program to be successful on and off the field, the amount of time, and you're looking, even, down here, you're seeing legendary coaches just, we're done. Right. I mean, you're talking guys like, Mark Cosentino at Shore. You're talking Steve Antonucci at Mid-South, like names that have been staples for a long time now stepping away from the game because, the burnout rate, man, it's just because the time and investment that goes into it, doing it the right way is just so much, I
mean, you probably are in full pad practices by now, right now. Like
man.
It sounds like baseball season ends. Next day, we're in full pad practice.
Like, and look, you look at it, like it is like you get rules and rules and rules and rules and all this other kind of stuff. But look, at the end of the day, everybody does their own thing. Whether somebody tattletales or plays that game, I could care less, dude. If you want to go out there and get better, right, and you're doing it like to get your team better, kudos to you, right? I understand rules and all that other kind of stuff. I'm not advocating for any of that. Like, do what you're supposed to do. But I mean, we want to like fault guys for like trying to dial up, like, go out there and work out, or we're going to promote our kids for that. So that college kids can, college coaches can come on campus and see our kids and do that kind of stuff. I think that stuff's absolutely phenomenal, right? It's probably one of the reasons New Jersey's behind in everything else is because all these other states have spring football in high school, right? They have all that other stuff. I get it. We can't do that stuff here because of whatever reasons, but I still think there's a way that we can finagle and get around it so that guys can kind of, hop into it and get better with it. But I do love hearing that you still go on the road, bro. And because I think that's so pivotal. A lot of these guys now are like, oh, if come to my camp. Like, no, man, go into the school. Like, if you really think a guy is there or a program is there that you have a guy or want a guy, create those relationships, use those networks, man. Like that stuff's important more so than just X's and O's.
Yeah. I talk with my staff all the time. I mean, look, there's no blueprint for Montclair State football. I mean, yeah, Coach G had his long career of success, but what I mean by that is like the Montclair State kid is different than a lot of other schools that maybe we're competing against, so the way Union College does it, we can't do it that way. I mean, they have different kids. They're in a different area. They're recruiting different types of people. it's not like they're bad or I'd probably do it similar to them if I were there. But,
Right.
We only have 3 full-time football coaches at Montclair. Other schools in our conference have more.
Absolutely.
So we have to do things differently. Maybe if I had 5 full-time coaches and I had 4 coaches on the road, maybe
it's so different.
Yeah, man, in the office or anything. And even just the way we practice, we have coaching discussions and it's like, well, let's do this or let's do that. It's like, well, yeah, but I got kids that go to Montclair State and they're getting great packages to go to Montclair and they live locally. And the only way that they can make it a great package is they have to commute. Well, I got kids that have to work. I have kids that they don't have a car.
You're talking to one of them, bro.
Yeah. And
I'll never forget. I had that, my junior year, I wasn't really kind of playing up to snuff, you know what I'm saying? And Coach Santora had to sit down with me and be like, look, man, I think you're working too much. Like, you're getting up at, 4:00, you open the gym, then you're going to class, you're coming to practice, right? Then you got class, you're coming to meetings, you're doing all this other kind of stuff. Like, those are real life D3 issues that not a lot of these, like, they're not sitting in a dorm waiting for class to happen and then go to a workout, and then go to practice. Like, there are guys commuting, working, like, hey, I got to take care of my sister or I got to take care of my kids. Like, some of these guys are at different places in their lives, man. Like, that's a lot of people I don't think get that part.
No. And I think it's tough because as a football coach, you're like, oh, let's have a film, session at 9 a.m. or let's do this at night or let's do this.
Who's got class? Who's got this? Who's got that? Right. And for you with 45 seniors, like, these guys are trying to fit certain classes at certain times, no matter what. Like, coach, I got to get this class done because this is my last one to wrap it up.
Yeah. And if I were to go the other direction and say, you know what, like, we're just not going to take those types of kids, Montclair State football wouldn't be very good. Montclair State football over the years, I know, like, all those kids we played with, coached, like, you had some dudes that weren't going to be able to make this work unless, we were efficient with our time and we weren't, doing a full-time job as a D3 football program. I played with Bobby Skinner. He was an animal. Bobby Skinner was a Division I football player that was working in corrections and coming to school and playing for us. He had to make things work. And, that's something I learned from Coach G is everybody's different and everybody has their own situations.
Everybody is different.
If you turn those guys away, Montclair State football can't compete the way I believe we can.
Absolutely not. No way, man. Because even me coming from Sacred Heart, transferring in there, like, I was done. I was done playing football. I'm like, I'm just done. Like, I don't need to do any of this stuff. And somebody's like, look, you should really reach out to Montclair, blah, blah, blah. And Coach G had recruited me out of high school and all that kind of stuff. And then, we just kind of sat down and he's like, look, I know your situation. You know what I mean? Like, I know you're transferring home because you got, stuff going on and whatnot. And look, like, that's where you need to be. But look, if you want to be a part of this team, then, like, we'll make it work, right? Like, and I'll be forever indebted for that because he allowed me to come home, handle the situation that I needed to handle with my cousin and all that kind of stuff passing away, be a part of family, which he preached to me. Like, look, that's where you need to be, but also allowed me to play the game that I loved, which was absolutely amazing. And, like, that just goes to show you, like, look, I bet you every guy that ever played for Coach G has that story. Right. Okay. You have it. I have it. And now, listen, man, like, just to see you kind of take the reins and roll with this whole thing, dude, like, I know look, I speak for myself, but, like, I'm excited about where the program's going. It's just like, the subtle little things, right? Like, you see more social media content and, guys are excited to go there and play, right? Black uniforms, like little things that are just, like, I just think it's phenomenal. And, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate you taking all the time, doing what you got to do. I mean, look, you're always running around 90 miles an hour, dude, but that's no different to me. But for other people to kind of see, like, this is life of a D3 football coach, and it's wearing a lot of hats, bro. And, kudos to you, dude. I look forward to great things.
Thanks, man. Well, listen, I got to reference something you just said. You crawled so we could run. Your senior year last game, you didn't tell Coach G, and you got black socks for the whole team. And Coach G came out during pregame and was like, so mad at you guys.
Told the story, bro. we told. I don't know who he was. I think it was. Dude, I don't know who. I think it was Torero. Rich. I have Richie on, right? And we're talking, and he's like, there's been more than just Rich that have referenced that last year Black Sock game, and people didn't understand. Like, we weren't like black wasn't part of the uniform. It was red, navy blue, and something else. And we just were like, yo, this is our last game. We're all going to wear these black Nike socks, which Nike wasn't even our sponsor. It's Adidas. And we just came out pregame, and Coach G was kind of just like, hey, you got me with the socks, but you better win the damn game. And thankfully we did. But, dude, yeah, like, talk about stuff like
now we have all black uniforms. We have all black
uniforms. Listen, that was one of the things, it was crazy. That was also the amount of respect that you had for him, that you literally were scared to wear certain socks because this is what you're supposed to be wearing, right? Like, and I'm not saying maybe scared is the wrong thing, but you didn't want to disrespect him and the tradition of Montclair State by doing something like that. Now, that being said, what you're doing, I love it because you're evolving, right? And you're moving and you're tweaking success, but at the same time, you're being who you are, bro. And that's what I just think that's awesome, man. So it's for me, I look forward to continuing to watch this program grow. Like you said, Montclair State, the university itself is exploding. I mean, it's not even close to what I was when I was there, 10, oh my God, it's almost 15 years ago. Holy hell. Every parking lot that was ever there is now like a building, right? Like, there's more students staying on campus. It's a great spot. It's a great school for guys to go to in terms of, look, and I tell people all the time, like, you think D3 football, you think one way, but like Montclair State's different D3 football.
Yeah. I mean, I was just having a conversation with Coach Carter last night from Bloomfield.
Yeah, buddy. Coach Carter, man.
Yeah.
Those Willie P guys.
I know. But he's like honorary Montclair State a little bit. He sent us so many guys.
100% Moose.
So I said to, we were talking about it, and, when you're getting recruited, don't look at how much you're getting. Look at what it's going to cost. And for a lot of guys, Montclair State's a great fit for you because the cost is more affordable. It's lower. And if you're a kid that's in need, and there's some areas, traditionally close to Montclair State that kids are in need, you go to school for a really good price. And, one thing in recruiting, again, I try to be transparent and I talk to kids, but hey man, if Montclair State's too expensive and school XYZ isn't as expensive, and you can verify that with me, like show me the package, I'll tell you the truth. Like, hey, this school is giving you a better package to go to this school.
100%.
That's I don't want to mislead kids, and Montclair can get enough good football players without I don't have to lie, steal, and cheat to get a kid here.
You ain't got to do it. Nope.
Yeah.
And the way with things are now, like, you never burn a bridge, continue a relationship, because the way things are with transfers and bounce backs and all that kind of stuff, like, dude, like, you got to recruit your own roster, but at the same time, all of those guys, like, the work is already put in, right? Like, those guys that now go away, maybe they don't choose Montclair, like, hey coach, but keep a good relationship. Like, had I not kept a good relationship with the people around me and Coach G himself, I'd have never played at Montclair State, because somebody wouldn't have said, hey man, Coach G needs somebody to go and, come in. Maybe you should, go check it out. Right. Like, I feel like that's like a big part of it too, is, keep those relationships. The recruiting's already done.
Yeah. I mean, kids that do it right by me in recruiting, if they don't choose Montclair State, it's no hard feelings.
We don't take it personal, right? It's actually better. Like, tell me you don't want to come here, because I'm not trying to force feed something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kids, coach, I really appreciate your time, but this school is where my family wants me to be, closer to home, cheaper. Those are all, good reasons. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes seeing kids make the mistake of, well, coach, I'm going to be a PWO because I'm a D1 player. And it's like, dude, you're spending $60K to go be a PWO. You could come to us, spend half that, and be a valuable member of our team.
Right.
And
you'll actually play year 2 rather than play year 5.
Exactly. If you're lucky. So, I mean, that part frustrates me, but again, communication is one of
they'll be back. Right. Those are the guys that'll be back. Like, coach, you were right. Like, You didn't like sitting on the bench, right? Like you didn't like not even getting a rep at practice because you're a walk-on, right? And the scholarship guy, you might be 10 times better than, but because you're a walk-on, you don't get those reps. And reps create playing time, and that's just how it works, man.
That's how it works. And like you said, it's good to keep those relationships. And that's why I try to tell guys, I had a kid this recruiting cycle who, just texted me randomly and said, I can't commit to Montclair State. I'm going somewhere else. And I said, well, what school are you going to? Like, what happened? Is it a financial thing? Can I help you with this? And when a kid responds to me in recruiting and says, well, I can't afford this. Can you help me try to figure this out? That means to me the kid wants to be here and he's going to try to make it work. But when the kid just throws his hands up and says, I can't afford it, and then don't text me back after 2-3 days.
There you go.
You burnt this bridge. So whether you could afford it or not, or when you go off to another place, like I'm not answering your calls next year when you didn't like that school. But if you're a kid that, coach, this is what it is, I'm picking this school, thank you for everything, then my phone's always open. And I've had the same number for a long time. So we'll have it. But that's okay. And you'd be amazed at the amount of good players we've had over the years that, made that decision, like you said, went somewhere else. And then they realize, I'm going to stay a little bit closer to home. Maybe I do have to work and do football not as on a scholarship level.
Shit happens, Yeah.
So we've been fortunate, and our location is huge. I mean, being right outside New York City, being in this part of Jersey where there's just so many good football teams and towns, it makes it easy. So we've been lucky.
Coach, man, I appreciate you taking the time, Coach. I mean, like I said, I've been trying to make this work for a long time. Obviously, like Montclair is a place that's near and dear to my heart. We have a different relationship because, shit, man, like played with you, saw you in a lot of different roles in terms of, a GA and then, player coach type deal, turned coach, doing all that other stuff. So for us to get a perspective from your viewpoint, having been that to this, I think really gives people a different perspective on the entire thing. So I really appreciate you taking the time, bro.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. It's good to finally get this done. And, we'll be in touch. Let me know, if you got any recruits down that way, you send them up to me.
Yeah, it, buddy. I appreciate it, man. All right, guys. Looks good. Like I said, hopefully, we'll do this again where we can get on here and kind of talk maybe some X's and O's or do whatever we got to do. But, once again, thanks a lot, Mikey, and I'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Take care, man. All right, guys. So like you just had, Coach Mike Palazzo, Montclair State University, head coach, been there about 18 months now. Like you said, we touched on a lot of different topics, things of that. I mean, you heard his story, incredible journey from literally, a guy that wasn't even on a roster spot to becoming, so much more and whatnot, and kind of see how he came up and arose through the ranks to where he's at right now, which is the head coach of, one of the most reputable Division III programs in the country. Seen a lot of positivity coming from him. You heard him talk about, recruiting, what he's looking for, so it was an absolute honor and pleasure to talk to him. So we will continue. Coach Schumann will be back with our next episode when we come back. Again, we appreciate you guys listening in, watching, taking the time out of your day. Like, subscribe, follow, do what you got to do to support us and whatnot, so that hopefully we can continue this thing going. So until next time, take care, fellas, ladies, gents, whoever is watching this show, because I appreciate you taking the time.